Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm about, give you some idea, a little more about who I am, and then kind of get into my talk, which partly is interactive. I'm going to ask you to participate in an exercise which is right at the heart of, I think, of diversity. It's right at the heart, I believe, of mentoring, thinking about what that means, thinking about what it means in an intercultural context. Hopefully, I think it will be about learning. It also could be a bit, which I think Armando was referring to. It can be a bit challenging. It also can be a bit create some tiny bit of discomfort. So I don't want you to think that we're going to do some kind of incredibly hard thing. It should be mostly fun. Let me say a little bit more about myself. Picking up on what Dr. Lightly said about increasing diversity. I work with organizations that are about that are either wanting to or in the process of increasing their diversity. And either helping them get started, helping them understand what they've gotten into after they got started. Again, referring to something Dr. Armando Rodriguez said, there can be tensions, as we all know, around diversity. And one of my interests in building intercultural community is to find some creative ways to look at the community building aspect, which then enables us to more effectively and creatively deal with any tensions that come from the diversity process. And so that the exercise I'll ask you to do in a few minutes is again at the heart, I think, of what this is about. At least it's an attempt to get there. Let me just, by way of continuing here, because it's helpful to me, just briefly from your point of view with regard to diversity, what are some questions you perhaps bring to this session in thinking about mentoring, again, thinking about differences? What are some questions you might have that we might just kind of factor in as we get into this little part of the session? What are some issues that you're currently dealing with or anticipating? Yes?
What's different about mentoring a student from a minority group versus a student from a foreign country versus a domestic student? What are the essential things that we need to know about it?
Okay. So the difference if from a minority group, like say a foreign, right, you said? Okay, thank you. Good piece to be thinking about. Other thoughts? Yes?
How do you increase diversity within your population of students in the first place?
Yeah. Again, great question. Thank you. Other thoughts that you've been mulling over? Yes?
I was wondering where we're going, how this meeting is going to help us to accomplish goals to help students.
Uh-huh. Is this going to help us do this? Real basic question, yeah. Well, hopefully, yeah, as we get into this, hopefully. Other thoughts? Okay, thank you. Let me describe to you what we're going to do at the moment. I'm going to ask you to divide up, to pick partners and divide up into partners. And I'll describe to you after we divide up what we're going to do. But let me set it up this way. A few things to keep in mind as we get into this, and kind of going with this gentleman's question, what will be helpful, and to put that together with the question about, reaching out to students and how do we increase that. A couple of things to keep in mind. It's always about the relationship. How do we develop the relationships that are going to increase the numbers that we want? And what is the nature of that relationship? I think those are good questions to ask. And where does mentoring fit in? So what I want to look at are some of the key dynamics that go into this kind of building of community. And to reflect on that, again, I'll ask you to participate in this exercise. So if you will, please, if you look around the room and find yourself a partner. I don't know what our numbers are. We may be uneven. We'll just have a three-way group. So if you don't mind looking around, find somebody that perhaps you'd like to know a little better. If you end up with your best friend, that's fine, or perhaps your spouse or partner is in the room. But let's just take a minute here to find a partner. And when you find your partner, sit together, turn and face each other. And after you're all set up, I'll describe to you what we're going to do. I guarantee you it'll be fine. Okay, these are the guidelines for this session. And again, I'll ask you to do this, then we'll debrief it and make the connections to mentoring and to intercultural diversity issues. I'm going to time this exercise, and I'm going to ask the participants, if I could use you two as just as an example here, to exchange listening in a very specific way. So let's say if Dr. Martin, if you start out as the listener, for example, when I say start, decide who's going to be the speaker and who's going to be the listener. I want the listener to give your total undivided attention to the speaker. Communicate any way you wish that you're really listening, but don't ask questions and don't make comments. In other words, you can't talk. But listen with your full attention, with your full focus to the speaker, but don't talk, don't ask questions, and don't make comments. Okay, now this is simply then for 7 minutes. I'm going to ask the speaker in this time frame has 7 minutes, very simply, to tell your life story. And let me give you the guidelines for this. One guideline, it's not a disclosure exercise. You may wish to bare your soul if you want to, but you don't have to. That's not an expectation. It's simply to tell your story any way you wish for 7 minutes. If you kind of feel like you run out of life before you run out of time, like if you have a 4-minute life and there's 3 minutes left, it's still your time. You know, figure out what you want to talk about for the full time. Again, it's open-ended. It's up to you what you want to do. At 7 minutes, I'll say switch roles. And if you're in mid-sentence or mid-thought, simply finish your thought and then switch roles. So the speaker becomes the listener and vice versa. This exercise is strictly verbal. There's nothing written. So just, it's about strictly being available to each other. There's nothing written. You will not be asked to introduce each other afterwards. I want to say that there's an exercise similar to this that goes around where people then stand and introduce each other. This is not that. I simply want you to just really listen to each other so that we can explore the implications of this, again, for mentoring and for diversity. Any questions or clarifications about the format? What's that? There's the subject is yourself. The subject is telling your life story. There's a couple of other short pieces to this. I'll fill you in on those 2 pieces when we finish this first piece. Okay? So decide who's going to talk first and who's going to listen first, and start.
Okay, I was born in 1953 in the north of England. 2 months after the Queen ascended the throne. When I was still a baby, we moved from the north of England to Wales. And I grew up in Wales all my childhood. I had 4 brothers and sisters, 1 of 5, so it was a big family. By British standards, very big. My father worked in a store, and he worked very long hours. My mother was a traditional stay-at-home mother. When I was a boy, I was very small. I didn't grow as fast as other children. I was always smaller than most of the people around me. And I was actually a little slow at school. Didn't do very well until I got to about 13 or 14 years of age when I started to blossom. I graduated from high school with good academic scores, and I went to college. University College Swansea, which is only 40 miles away from where I lived, but it was away from home. I was there for 3 years where I studied civil and structural engineering. When I graduated from there, I took a job working for a major government organization back in the north of England. I worked there, I was in highway design and traffic analysis. After 2 or 3 years there, I went out on site in construction. I worked on site for 2 years and I loved that. I loved being part of the drama of the action. I liked it so much I left the government and I went to work for a contractor. Where I worked for about 1.5 years. Then instead of being a government supervisor, I was part of the sharp end and part of the contractor. And when I did that work, it was very hot, dramatic. Money was in the air, and it was great work. I loved that. After that, I moved. When that contract finished, I moved back to Wales and I worked for a consulting engineer, again on site. And that was another 2-year job where I worked in the supervision of roads and bridges. I loved that too, but after then I'd had about 5 years of contracting and I'd sort of worked it out in my system. I then went to work for a little municipal engineering authority where there was a small group, very small, and I was a little fish in a big fish in a little pool. By that time I had 2 daughters and a marriage that was very unstable. Then I took a job in a junior college, equivalent to a junior college in Wales, and I taught in that junior college. The teaching load was about 25 hours a week. Towards the end of my 4 years there, the marriage ended very suddenly, and I was left wondering what to do.